be involved, to be engaged in this work of evangelism is something that brings great joy for us. It brings great joy for the person. And then, as we've got noted here, it's a little bit tough to read. I couldn't tell on my computer screen. But in Luke chapter 15 and verse 10, likewise I say unto you, there's joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So not only are we joyful when we see somebody converted to Christ, not only are they joyful because now they've received this whole new change of life and the granting of forgiveness in their life, but it's impressive to me that it says this brings joy into the very presence of God. I mean, right around the throne of God, the angels rejoice, they celebrate. This is a momentous occasion. It's like all of heaven stops to watch this person submit their life to the Lord, to come up out of this water. They've died in the watery grave of baptism. Now they've come back to life again, and there is joy and excitement. So we should feel that. There should be that kind of happiness about us and that kind of attitude that directs us. So look at your first question on your handout there. What are some reasons why you think that Christians fail to evangelize as we should? If we know that it's going to bring that much joy, it's going to bring joy in their life, maybe the lives of family, friends, and even into the presence of God, why do you feel like so many Christians don't evangelize? Why don't we evangelize like we should? Fear of how we'll be perceived, okay. Okay, so I might not like you because now you've told me something that I have to change my life and how I'm going to be perceived or how you'd be perceived in that. Okay, Jada. Okay, yeah, we've hired a preacher to do this. Okay, so we pay a preacher to do that, so it's his job. It's not really my job. I should be a good example, maybe, I think. Maybe I should try. I mean, that's kind of the justification that we sometimes go through. Christine? Okay. So you say you've been in the church since you were 12? When you were 12? Okay. So you were baptized at 12, so that was probably 12, 15 years ago, right? Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking. Okay. Drew? Yeah. Okay, and the problem with that is tag teaming really to what Christine just said is again the rejection that if I invite a friend or a neighbor to church with me and they don't come, now I kind of, how do I feel? How should I act? What should I do around them? And so there is kind of that fear sometimes. Richard? Okay, yeah, I think that I was listening one time. I was in the audience. Brother Roy Lanier Jr. was speaking to a group of us preachers, and we were talking about evangelism. And he said, in his view, in fact, I had it in my notes, that the number one reason we don't is because we lack faith. We just lack faith. I don't really believe, like you're saying, they're going to go to hell if they don't become faithful to God, if they're not a Christian. And if I lack that faith, well, then we'll go to the ball game together. We'll eat dinner together. We'll go play golf together. We'll have a nice time, and I want to try to be a good example. But if I don't view their soul in jeopardy, if I don't really believe their soul is in jeopardy, then what's the push for me to do that? Because it can be very awkward. That's right. Yeah. Russ? Oh. Yeah, that I feel maybe inadequate, and I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to mess it up. And so if they ask me a question I don't know, what am I going to do? And so sometimes we feel like we can't, maybe I shouldn't do anything. Maybe I shouldn't say anything, because if they ask me this, I don't know what I'll do if they ask me about this, or if they premillennialism, I don't know anything about. So how do I deal with these things becomes a real issue as well. Brother Surrender.
Sometimes we will forget the main commandment what Jesus had said to us after his resurrection. Go into the world.
Right.
We might forget it.
Yeah, and if we do, you're right. It now becomes secondary. It's not as important. We forget that to be the case. There are a lot of different things. We can be too busy. I'm too busy for this. Okay, I've got so many other things on my plate right now. People think they're too busy. That's somebody else's job. I even had an elder tell me one time, this is not here, just so you know. I was in the state of Washington, and an elder told me one time, I was talking to him about evangelism and how we needed to get the church going and so on. And he said, kind of shook his head, and he said, I know that's right. He said, but I'm just telling you, the more people you get, the more problems you got. And I said, isn't that the business the church is in? I mean, isn't that what we should be doing, trying to help people who have problems? There's no doubt that's the truth. If we bring another 50 people in here, and they come from all walks of life, they've got a lot of baggage that they bring with, a lot of problems and a lot of trouble. And we're going to have to deal with those, and we should deal with those. But that shouldn't be a deterrent to say, well, this one's dealing with drugs, this one has this situation, this one's dealing with that situation. I don't know. It'd be easier just not to bring them in. Aren't we a nice, happy family? We all get along well, and everything's good. But that just doesn't work. And so, as we've talked about, evangelism is for the purpose of godliness as well. I want you to look at another verse that's not on your handout in 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. I think we often use this verse in the beginning, but we fail to read the rest of this. 1 Peter chapter 2, beginning at verse 9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people. Now, we've used this verse and we've referenced it many times and talked about the priesthood of all believers. We're all priests. We're all part of God's special relationship, all part of this unique family tie that we have now. But look at what he goes on to say. Finish reading the verse. His own special people, he says, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who were once not a people, but now you are the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now you have obtained mercy. So the point is not just the priesthood of all believers, this wonderful family atmosphere that we should have in the church. That's all great, and that's true. That is what that's teaching. But he says that you may proclaim his praises and show his marvelous light. We have a responsibility to do this. And so as Brother Surrender even suggested, we may forget, I forgot that that's what I'm supposed to do. This is what we are supposed to do. That's who we are supposed to be. So let's talk about evangelism and define it first of all. Evangelism and evangelist and evangelize all come from the same basic root word that we would get the same word, the gospel, as far as the Greek is concerned. And it means to bring good news, to spread glad tidings. When we talk about evangelism, we're especially referencing the idea of the relationship that comes from salvation in Christ. So when we talk about evangelism, we're talking about spreading good news, about spreading the glad tidings. And yet, why is it sometimes that when we talk about evangelism, we go to somebody and we tell them all the things that they can't do in their life anymore. Why do we start there? I mean, and that sounds like bad news. You mean I can't go here anymore? Can't do this anymore? I can't act like that. I can't talk this way. I mean, yeah, you're saying I got to change everything in my life? Why would we start there? I mean, I don't know why we do. I think part of it is because we have a difficulty between churchianity and Christianity, and we struggle with that sometimes. I think sometimes we're more interested in converting them to the church than we are of converting them to Christ. And so the good news is what? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that ought to be easy for us to answer that. What's the good news? Jesus died for my sins. I don't have to pay for my sin. That's, from a human standpoint, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense at all. I did it. I should have to pay for it. In fact, we teach that to our children, right? You're raising your children, certain things. You did this, you broke this, you're going to have to pay for this. Okay? You did this, you broke the neighbor's window. So do we all step in and no? I mean, it's supposed to be little Johnny's responsibility now because he did this. So the good news is you don't have to pay for that. Somebody already paid for that for you. And so that is good news, because what's the bad news? If I don't do this, what? I can't pay for it, but the bad news is I'm going to hell if I don't get them paid for. And Jesus is the only way this can happen. So there's no one way to evangelize. This goes kind of to what Drew was saying earlier. There's no one right way to evangelize. I know a guy who was converted to Jesus Christ because he was riding the subway up in, I think it was New York, and somebody had left a gospel tract on the seat. He read the gospel tract, he went home and he started doing some study. He was converted to Christ, he's preaching the gospel. Now, is that the most effective way to spread the gospel, to leave a tract on a subway? Well, anyway, is. But, you know, if that's the most effective way, I live here in Florida. You live here in Florida. When's the last time you saw a subway go through here? I mean, so, hey, we get a free pass, right? If that's the most effective, I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that's not necessarily the best way. It sure worked for that guy. I've known of people who've been converted by back in the 70s and 80s, used to be a lot of dial a Bible message that you could call a phone number and you could listen to a recorded Bible message. Encourage you then maybe to take a Bible correspondence course, okay? Many of us haven't even ever heard, what is a Bible correspondence course? Don't even know what that is, okay? People have been converted by Jewel Miller film strips. Lots and lots and lots of people by Jewel Miller film strips, okay? A lot of people don't even know what a film strip is today, okay? Right, or it prompted him to go the right way, yeah. So my granddaughter was in a hotel room one time and she asked, what is this over here? She's pointing to a thing that's sitting on the desk, and she said, what is that? And they said, it's a telephone. And she said, you mean you have to stand right there while you talk on the phone? Okay, so times change, and Jewel Miller film strip, what is that in the eyes of a lot of people? So correspondence course, tracts, a lot of people have been converted via sermons that they've heard preached or taught, home Bible classes or cottage classes, as they used to be called oftentimes. Door-to-door canvassing that has worked in some places. Down in Barbados, I've mentioned this many times, they call it house knocking, not door knocking down there. And you can knock on the house, the corner of the house or the door anywhere, and if somebody is home, you are almost guaranteed you can have a Bible discussion with them. It may not go anywhere very far, but they're very open to having Bible discussion. Somebody knocks on your door that you don't know, what do? Yeah, a lot of people don't even answer the door. You might look out the little peephole. You might pull the curtain aside, and then you tiptoe very quietly back. But I mean, it's a different culture, different place, different things work. People have been converted over television shows, radio programs, gospel meetings, or protracted meetings, as they used to be called, because they went on and on for weeks. There's no one right way to do it. So the second question, why do most churches, do you think, get stuck in a rut of just using one or two things? Like what Drew said. Just tell everybody to come to church. Invite all your friends and neighbors to come to church. Is that a bad thing? It depends what they're going to find when they come. Okay? I don't want to say it that way, but that's really the truth. One of the best things you can do is to invite somebody to come and worship with the church. One of the worst things you can do is invite somebody to come and worship with the church if they're not received and welcomed and don't see spiritual, godly people worshiping God. You might close the door for good with somebody like that. So why do we tend to get stuck in this one or two routine thing? Okay, it's always worked before. That's a very good one and easy. My grandfather did this back in, when the earth was still cooling. And so it worked then, it'll work now. Okay? Sure? Okay. Just the exact opposite of standard. That's right. We've never done it like that before. We've never tried that. Okay, and that's right. So a denomination did it, so that's wrong. Okay, if we put it off in that category. We might even quote Brother Haley, who used to say, if it's new, it ain't true. And if it's true, it ain't new. Okay, so if oh no, this is a new method, a new way, but he wasn't talking about that. He's talking about truth, Bible truth. Okay, so what else can you think of? What other reasons? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so it's almost easy to become self-congratulatory because maybe we didn't even see a bunch of baptism, but we knocked on 500 doors. Okay, so we just kind of pat ourselves on the back. What a great thing we did, even though we may have done it horribly, the way that we did it. But the point is, there's no one right way. Sometimes I think it's just because it's routine, and routine is easy, and I don't have to think when I do routine, okay? I've said this to people before. If you want to break your routine, drive to work a different way every day for a week, okay? Right? And we'll get into some other things of what does work. I think fear is another means as to why we don't want to do something different. We're afraid of a new method, afraid to think sometimes in that way. How about the second part of that question? So what can be done about it? What should we do about it? Be willing to fail. Okay. And how do you like failure? Yeah, I hate it too. I don't like to fail at anything. And so it's kind of like, I know how to do it this way, but if you're talking about something different, we may not, and so it's just an easier thing to push aside. I think that's a good point. Fear of failure. So what do we need to do? Just be willing to, let's do this. We also need to be willing to do something else. Think, okay? We need to be willing to think because a lot of times we just don't think. We just have done the same plug in routine over and over and over again. We need to try to understand that methodology is not the right or wrong, but it is the message. It has to be true. It has to be the same message that we take out, but however we take it out, if we're going out and knocking on doors, if we're going to preach on the radio, if we're going to preach in the pulpit. I mean, how many people did the Apostle Paul convert via the radio? None. Okay. So is that wrong? Should we not preach on the radio? No, that's not what that means. So we need to be able to think about methodology and recognize that methodology changes as time changes. Okay, if I hand you a cassette tape today, what are you going to do with it? Okay, that, or you're going to look for, somebody who is my age or older who has in their closet somewhere an old cassette player, okay, and they can plug this in and listen to it. So what I'm saying is methodology changes because time changes. We need to be willing to do that. We need to try to understand our culture better than we often do. I think we need to be students of culture to some degree. Yeah, Gwen? Okay. Yeah, that was one that was just forced upon us when the pandemic struck and people said, uh-oh, what are we going to do? I mean, everything changed. We didn't like it. I mean, and it forced us out of comfort zones, and we had to think differently, do things differently to even try to put a Band-Aid on what was going on at the time. So in the 1940s through the 1960s, at least here in Florida, they used to have what would often be called a protracted meeting. Paul's father went all over the state of Florida and set up, in fact, Paul helped set up tents. And he had set up a tent outside, and he would preach for a week or 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And the sermons sometimes would be 1 to 2 hours long. And I don't know if your dad preached that long, but would sit outside, and people would walk along with the old spray cans for mosquito spray, and they're spraying on the aisles and going down as people sat there and listened to preaching. So how about if we do that next week? Or maybe let's wait till August. Let's wait till August, and we'll put up a tent outside, and I want you to invite all your friends. We're going to sit outside, and Wayne's going to preach for 2 hours. And he's got 10 kids, so they can spray all the mosquito spray, okay? We'll send them out doing that. How effective are we going to be? You're not even coming, okay, right? So, but the point is, we have to think, back during the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, some of those things were very much the case. That's not going to work today. We have to be willing to think. So, let's look on. Someone once wisely said, they summed up the challenge of prioritizing this way: the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing, okay? And that's really what priority is all about. So Jesus, there it is. Jesus came, and his primary mission, he says, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. I'm persuaded Jesus knew he was going to perform miracles, he was going to help people, he was going to do it, but his primary mission in coming was to seek and save the lost. And he would do that by his preaching and teaching and by the giving up of his life on the cross. So Jesus comes for that main purpose. Should our primary mission be any different than that? It really shouldn't. And yet we get so sideways focused in the other things around us. So why do you feel that we're just not as actively involved as we should? Really it's a similar question to question number 1. Fear, lack of faith, fear of rejection, fear that I won't know what to do, how to do. So what are some things that Christians can do to help share Jesus with other people? Now I can go to what Christine said when she jumped ahead and talked about prayer. Sharon, Clark, and pray. Okay, that's an often neglected medium altogether when I hear people talk about evangelism is prayer. What else can we do? Yep. Okay. Right. And showing them that, yeah. Okay, all right, Caleb? Oh, okay. Matt's, your answer was so good. It just, yeah, I would tell, that was great. But you're right in the sense of living the Christian life is really what we're talking about. One of the greatest things you can do to evangelize is to live a Christian life as a Christian should live. Okay? I mean, that you're kind, you're warm with people and receiving, you're helpful when somebody is in need and you can fulfill that need, and you're doing the things that Jesus would do if he were standing right next to you or if you were Jesus. Okay? Richard. Okay. Okay, yeah, and I mean, to be able to recognize that Jesus died for all. And not to make our own divisions as well. He's not interested. You know, because of their life and the choices they wouldn't have any interest. And so we just forget them. And sometimes they're the most hungry and looking for an answer in their life. What else can you think of? Okay. Okay, all right. Sonny? Okay, yeah, it's a different world, and I mean, and culturally things continue to shift and change and always do, and they always will. I mean, what we're talking about today is going to be dated in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years as to what is effective. If I would have asked you 20 years ago about putting a podcast online, you would have said, what is online? What do you mean? Okay, I mean, there would be no concept of this as to what we were talking about, or hardly any. But I want to make a very specific point, because I think it's something we fail in drastically, and that is make friends with people who are not Christians. Aaron Chambers one time said, I want some of my best friends to not be Christians. And then he said, but not for long. And I think he's exactly right. If I'm going to ever hope to evangelize and reach the lost, and I spend all of my time with my brethren, and I go out to eat with my brethren, and I go play golf with my brethren, and I do everything that I do is with my brethren, how effective am I going to be? Only if somebody happens to see me get in my car every Sunday morning and say, Jody, where do you go Sunday morning? I see you get in your car, and Melissa gets in the car with you every single Sunday. Where are you going? And I just go to church. Sorry. And I almost apologize for it. No, I need to make friends and make contacts so that I can develop relationships with people. Steve?
I think see a need. If you could do something about it, you need to do it.
Okay, yeah, and when you have that opportunity. Exactly. I recall Jesus one time said, or the people complained about Jesus, he ate with who? He ate with sinners. He hung out with people who were not just his apostles. And why did he do that? Why didn't Jesus know any better? In fact, that's what the Pharisees said. He ought to know better than this. And what was his purpose of hanging around with and eating with sinners? Yeah, so he could teach them and show them and lead them and bring them along. Carl. Right? Okay? Okay, sometimes that's exactly right. And to come back to what Russ had said earlier, I feel like maybe, if I feel like I have to be perfect, I have to know the answer to every question. You know what the answer is sometimes? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I'll see if I can't find you an answer to that. Okay? And that actually is more winsome than trying to fake your way out of it and do a little sidestep. Somebody asks you a question, you don't know what the answer is, just tell, I don't know. But you know what? I'll look and see if I can't find what God's answer is on that. What's that? That's right. Love our neighbors ourselves. I mean, the second greatest commandment that we should have. Yeah. Okay. That I am no better than anybody as far as that goes, and to try to talk to somebody. Because if I come off, I'm up here, and I'm high and mighty and trying to talk to somebody, and Matt, you need to get your life straightened out. And I leave it in such a way that I'm so much better than you. That's not going to create any opening as far as listening along those lines. Okay, we could talk a lot more, but let me go on. I need to move on. Let me talk about the 3 essentials real quick. I think these are the 3 greatest things as far as evangelism is concerned. It must be in you first, okay? It's kind of hard if you're going to be a car salesman and you were going to work for Toyota, if you pull up in a Chevrolet, okay? That's going to be a little, because, my thinking is, what? Why aren't you driving a Toyota? Okay, I've told this story before. Melissa and I went to one of these timeshare things years and years and years ago, so we could get a free weekend at the beach or whatever it was. I don't remember. And so the girls, she is laying it on. You need to buy this. You need to do this. You need to invest this money. You need to do this. You need to do this. And basically saying anybody with any sense at all does this. And I said to her, how many do you own? And she said, I don't own any. And I said, why not? She said, I don't have the money. I said, there you go. So, if she had said, actually, I have 2 of those and I'm saving for my 3rd week or whatever, I might have thought, oh, wow. She's young. She must really see that's important. But she's telling me exactly what I was telling her. I don't have the money for this. I can't do this. Oh, sure, you can. Anybody can. Everybody can. Well, why don't you? Okay. But it has to be in you first. For evangelism to work, I need to be convinced that Jesus saved my soul because I needed rescued. And so, not only that, I'm convinced that you need it too. And so I needed it so much, I changed my life. And what I'm asking you, not anything that I haven't done or not willing to do or don't believe in. And so it has to be in you first. The power of a changed life is maybe one of the greatest things that we have to work. The second thing is it must touch other people. This is what I mentioned before, that we have to reach out to those who are lost. Evangelism is outreach. Thereby, it must touch other people. Paul said it this way. I think this is beautiful. In Titus chapter 2 and verse 10, Paul told Titus that we are to adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in all things. The word adorn means to make it beautiful, to beautify something. And so what he actually says is the gospel is so beautiful, but what you have is the ability to show it in your life by a change. You make it even more beautiful by your changed life. You adorn the gospel in that way. So touch other people's lives. It might be helping the neighbor next door because she's having trouble with something. You fix her the gate on her fence. Whatever it is, there's 1,000 things that we can do to touch other people's lives. And the third thing is it must be put into words. Ultimately, we have to say something. It would be nice if we could just be good people, nice people, and not ever have to say anything. But that's not the way it is. I can know that there is a God. Romans chapter 1 tells me I can know there's a God and that he's a powerful God by looking at a tree, looking at a sunset, looking at a beautiful mountain scene. And I can know there is a God and he's a powerful God. but I don't know what he wants me to do with my life by looking at a tree or by looking at a sunset. Somebody has to say, Jody, here's what you need to do with your life. And here's how you can follow God. And here's how to do these things. So ultimately, it has to be put into words. In Acts chapter 11, you remember the story of Cornelius calling for Peter to come. In Acts chapter 11, when Cornelius now is reporting on what he did, chapter 11, verse 13, it says, he said, I was told, send men to Joppa and call for Simon, whose surname is Peter, and he will tell you words by which you and your household will be saved. And then it says, and so I began to speak to them. Peter, God could have done anything, right? God could have written it up on the sky, up in the clouds. But he didn't. He dispatched a man to go to them to do something. What was it to do? Speak. Say something. Words. I have been given words whereby, he says, so Peter said, I will tell you words by, they said of Peter, he will tell you words by which you and your household will be saved. So we have to put it into words. Ultimately, we have to do that. Romans chapter 1 and verse 20. Again, for since the creation of the world, the invisible attributes of God are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even as eternal power and Godhood, that they are without excuse. So no one can look at creation and say there's not a God, but I can look at creation all day long and not know what God wants me to do. It's going to take Russ or whomever to come over and say, look, here's how you do this. Here's what God wants you to do. So which of those three do you think we struggle with the most? Okay. Okay, it's got to be in us in the sense of being fully convinced of that. Okay? Somebody else, what do you think? Yeah, put it into words to me seems like the most challenging, because I can be nice and good and helpful and kind and all these things, but walking through the awkward, and it sometimes is awkward to say it, to put it into words. But I think that's a great phrase I heard years ago, to walk through the awkward. We need to be willing to walk through the awkward and say, let me tell you about the Lord. I'm concerned about your soul. Have you heard about Jesus? Or whatever it is that we're going to use for our introduction and to go and begin to talk to somebody. Let me leave you with some suggestions this morning. Number one is pray for the lost. Sadly, this is maybe the most often neglected aspect of evangelism. I have seen evangelism programs that churches have put together, I don't know how many through the years, and look through them, and prayer never even be mentioned. We need to pray and ask God to help us. God, put somebody in my life today that I can reach out to. Pray for the lost, and pray for yourself as well, that you'll have the courage and the knowledge to know and to say and to do. Pray for them by name. Don't be afraid to pray for somebody by name. You have family, you have friends, you have neighbors. God, I'm asking you to open up a door for Bob so that I can talk to Bob. Or whatever the case is. Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 20, this is kind of puts it on the line here. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think. God can do more than you could think. You think we could have another 100 people in here by the end of next year? Or by the end of this year? Who are faithful, baptized into Christ? Wow. You don't believe we can? Do you believe we can? If we could, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, could we or not? Okay, yes, we could. All right. And you know what God says? I can do more than that. 100, is that all you're asking for? Exactly. So number 2, begin with those who are closest to you. Start with those who you know the best. I'm just telling you, cold calling, knocking on the door is not the best. I'm not saying don't do it, but the very best opportunity you're going to have is the person that you know and know well, because of the relationship that we've already talked about before. Diligently pray for them, then make an effort to reach out to them. Be aware that sometimes this is the most emotionally charged discussion that you'll ever have in your life. I can remember talking to my mother. Melissa and I have been talking with her over and over and over again until she finally obeyed the gospel at 69 years old, just with tears and begging and pleading with my mom to think and to open. And I mean, it was a lot easier when we didn't have those conversations. But they were a lot more important. Third thing I would say is, I love this term, recommend. Colin used to use this a lot and talk about recommend the church. Don't just invite somebody, but recommend the church. Because what do you do with a recommendation? You ever recommend a restaurant to somebody? Why did you recommend a restaurant? The meal was great, service great, whatever. You go there often. And so somebody comes and tells you, hey, have you ever been to such and such, this restaurant? Let me tell you, it's one of our favorite places. So what do? You normally check, you put that in your memory bank. Next time you have an opportunity to go out, you say, hey, maybe we ought to go to this place. Okay? So recommend the church. Tell them about something that's going on that you're excited about, that you're interested in. The Vacation Bible School that Drew mentioned a few minutes ago. A Bible class that you're sitting in. Whatever it is that you recommend. They've got some of the greatest people there. Let me tell you this, whatever the case is. Now, the next one, just quickly, living an exemplary life. We've talked about that a lot already, noted that. Titus chapter 2 and verse 10, adorn the doctrine. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16, to be salt and to be light. And the next one, mail or post something, regularly post on your social media. Include a link to things that would speak to who you are and of your faith. And put that out there. I've said before, I don't do social media. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's not me. So if you have that opportunity, use that opportunity and do what you can with that. The next one is invite others to something special. Okay? Let them know this is something special. I've heard people invite to a gospel meeting before, a whole week shot. Monday through Friday night, we got a gospel meeting. By the way, do you want to come? I got to be at the church every night. Would you like to come with me? No, I don't want to. That's the response that the person feels. So this is the most important question of the whole class today, okay? How important is this lesson to you and what will you do with it? Thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. We have 2 more classes this quarter and then we'll be changing again.